We believe that we are finite human beings. There was a time when I did not exist, you did not exist.
Thank you, Mufti Ibn Hajjuddin.
Give me a 5-minute comments.
So therefore, Jesus without a father, he's born from the womb grave. This was Allah is above the laws. You can create Jesus without a father. And just like Christians believe Jesus is going to come back, the Muslims believe Jesus. The big difference is that we believe in a prophet who came after. His name is Muhammad. And I am the completion of the religion that was sent upon all my biologically, physically being the son of God. We believe that God is above and beyond any physical son of God. We do not believe that this is an elevation of the status of Jesus. We believe this will be raising the status of God.
Cannot be answered merely through science, but rather God in His infinite mercy, He sent revelation upon His selected prophets throughout time to answer these fundamental questions and to provide us guidance. So Islam is submission to the will of that God who we believe is the originator of the universe. Just to demystify this term Allah, sometimes people, knowingly or unknowingly, sometimes there's campaigns of misinformation against this term and creating wrong images in people's minds regarding the term Allah itself. They say that, na'udhu billah, may God forbid, this was a moon god that was worshipped by the pagans in Arabia, etc., etc., and the Muslims still worship that god, pagan god. Nothing could be farther from the truth. What is Allah? Allah is a unique word in the Arabic language. It does not have a male gender for it nor a female gender. There is not a male form of the word and a female form of the word, like God and Goddess. So God is masculine and Goddess is feminine, but Allah is neither masculine nor feminine. Allah is such a word which doesn't have a dual or plural. Just like you have God and gods, plural of God is add an S, there is no plural of the word Allah. And what does this Allah mean? And who is this object of worship of the Muslims that they worship this Allah? Who is this Allah? What is this Allah? We believe that we are finite human beings. There was a time when I did not exist, you did not exist, when our parents and our grandparents were not born. There was a time when human beings did not walk on this earth. This earth was populated by dinosaurs. And if you go further back, there was a time when there were no animals on this earth. And if you go further back, there was a time when this planet Earth did not exist. The solar system did not exist. The Milky Way galaxy did not exist. This universe as we know it did not exist. And the samawati wal ardi kanata ratqan. The universe was compacted together. God says in the Quran, فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا. This is a Big Bang theory that is explained many centuries later, is mentioned by God in the Quran. Then we expanded the universe from that one compacted unit that was all compacted together, and then thereafter the universe was expanded, God says. وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. And we are continually expanding it. This is the continual expansion of the universe. It's mentioned in the Quran as well. There was a time when this universe did not exist. Nothing that we know and see and touch and existed. هُوَ الْأَوَّلُ فَلَيْسَ قَبْلَهُ شَيْءٌ. There was one being, a supernatural being, an entity that always existed. Wajibul wujud means he's necessarily existent. There is no concept of any existence without his pre-existence. And he is the source of existence of everything else that is in existence. And what is that supreme being? لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. None of his creation is like unto him. He is the sole creator. Everything in existence besides him is his creation. He is the supreme being who has no father, no children, no offspring, no spouse. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. That supreme being is, we call him Allah. You can call him God with a capital G, God, the supreme God. That is the object of worship. And we believe he created all the human beings, black and white, and of all colors and shades in between. And he sent us onto this world, and he did not leave us astray, wondering what the purpose of our existence is, but rather he sent prophets. And all of these prophets we believe in as Muslims. What is unique and sometimes very surprising for our guests is when they start studying about Islam, is how many similarities there are. For example, I took world religions in college. We studied Buddhism, we studied Confucianism, we studied Hinduism, we studied pagan religions, Native American religions, African religions. All of these other religions, if you ask them, what do you believe about Jesus? they have nothing positive to say or negative. They have no concept of Jesus. What do you say about Abraham, Moses? What do you say about God? They have very different concepts of God. They might believe in reincarnation, continually coming back into this world. They have all different concepts. Worshipping spirits, worshipping ancestors, worshipping all different things. But when you come to study about Islam, and if you have, I'm assuming, many of you who come from a Christian or Judeo-Christian background. So, you will be shocked to see how similar they are. How similar Islam's stance on many of these fundamental questions is compared to Judaism and Christianity. Muslims believe in one God. Muslims believe the God, He created the heavens and earth in 6 days. خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ. This might remind you of, Genesis. God created the earth and heavens and earth in 6 days. So we believe in that. Then we believe in the prophets. Muslims believe in Adam and Eve. We have the same. Adam becomes Adam. That's as far as the difference is. Adam versus Adam. And then we believe in Abraham. It's Ibrahim. We love these prophets. We name our children the names of Abraham, Ibrahim, Musa, Isa. These are the names of our kids and our nephews and nieces. Not nieces, perhaps. Nieces we have Sarah and Hagar and Maryam, Mary. So these prophets are very dear to us. We believe in all of these prophets. We believe in, and no one can be a Muslim if he says, I believe in Muhammad, but I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe Jesus is the prophet of God. Then technically, I could write a whole fatwa and write a statement that this person is not a Muslim if he does not believe in Jesus as a prophet of God, because it is an integral element of our religion to believe in Jesus as a prophet of God. We believe in Mary, the Virgin Mary, to honor her. There's a chapter, there's only 114 chapters in the Quran, there's a whole chapter Mary, chapter Maryam. And she's revered and respected in our religion. And along with all these prophets, we believe in this, that we have been sent in this world for a short period of time. If you believe in God and follow His teachings, then God will be pleased with us. Then we believe this world will be destroyed. And then there will be a judgment day. Just like the Christians and Jews believe in a judgment day. And that judgment day, God will judge between His creation. Then there is a paradise that He has created for those who believe in Him. Then there is a hell for those who disbelieve in Him and rejected Him and committed oppression and tyranny. So these beliefs are all the same. Of course, we're not going to shy away from the differences. We want to mention the differences too and be clear on that. Where are the differences then? Are you saying that you're the same thing? No, there are some fundamental differences. So let's start with Jesus. So with respect to Jesus, and I'm by no means preaching or converting. This is just an educational session, just so we learn what do Muslims believe in. So every single statement of mine, particularly regarding controversial matters, whether I articulate it or I forget to, can be qualified by the statement that as Muslims, this is what Muslims believe, what they believe. We're not necessarily saying that this is the right belief for you to believe in, but this is what we believe. When it comes to Jesus, we believe that He was born of the Virgin Mary. The Quran speaks about the birth and the miracle of the birth and how she became pregnant and that she was very ashamed, and she went and she prayed unto God, Ya laytani mittu qabla hadha. I wish I died before this day came. How am I going to face the people? And then God told her that very similar story when you go out to the people and then they started objecting. How did you have a baby without being married? Oh Mary, what happened to you? How wrong of sin you committed? فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ. Then she pointed to her baby. And they said, قَالُوا كَيْفَ نُكَلِّمُ مَنْ كَانَ فِي الْمَهْدِ صَبِيًّا. How can we speak to a baby in a cradle? Why are you pointing to a baby and telling us to respond to the baby? You better speak up yourself and defend yourself. And the baby spoke from the cradle. He said, قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. Then the baby said, verily I am the slave of God. This is where the story is different. He didn't say I am the son of God, he said I am the slave of God. So, Muslims believe that figuratively, allegorically, majazan, figuratively, we can all be considered the children of God. This is not normally said in Islamic context, but I'm taking this opportunity to say this from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Al-Khalqu Ayalullah, فَأَحَبُّ الْخَلْقِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَحْسَنُهُمْ إِلَى عَيَالِهِ. That the entire creation is the dependence of God. Ayat normally is used for the family. So, figuratively, yeah, we are all the sons of God, the daughters of God, the creation of God. But biologically, physically being the Son of God, we believe that God is above and beyond any resemblance to His creation. As I mentioned earlier, we are strictly monotheistic faith. So we say God does not have a spouse, God does not have parents, God does not have a father or mother, nor does He have a son or a daughter, physical son or daughter. We do not believe that this is an elevation of the status of Jesus. We believe this will be degrading the status of God by saying that He has a physical son. So we believe God is above and beyond having physical sons. Then who is the father of Jesus? So that's the whole miracle. We believe that God, He created all of us with a father and a mother, and then He created Jesus without a father. He is born from the Virgin Mary. This was a miraculous birth, defying laws of physics, because God is not bound to physical laws. He is the maker of physical laws. He can follow them when He wants, He can break them when He wants. We're talking about who's above the law. The president is not above the law, I'm not above the law, right? But God is above the laws. Right? Allah is above the laws. He created Jesus without a father. And that's what Muslims believe about Him. And then we believe He was uplifted to the heavens. And we believe in the return of Jesus, believe it or not. Just like Christians believe Jesus is going to come back, the Muslims believe Jesus will come back too. And so that is another interesting parallel. And then of course, after Jesus, a significant difference is that we believe in a prophet who came after. His name is Muhammad. And we believe that he was a recipient of divine revelation. And he said, and he continued to stress, I have not come with a new religion. I am the completion of the religion that was sent upon all my predecessors, the prophets that were my brothers. I follow the same religion as them, and I received the revelation from the same God as them. So this sense of connectivity with all the previous prophets is a central part of our religion. We don't believe that Muhammad came with a new faith, and Islam was founded by Muhammad. No, we believe Islam was there from the day one, from Adam's time, from the first human being. And he came to perfect it and complete it. And Muslims live throughout the world. Another common misconception is we believe that all Arabs are Muslims. No, not all Arabs are Muslims. Lebanon is a Muslim Arab country, Arabic-speaking country, and it's majority Christian. And the greatest number of Muslims in any country is Indonesia. In Indo-Pak subcontinent, there are more Muslims in Indo-Pak, Bangladesh subcontinent than the entire Middle East put together. So, not all Arabs are Muslims, not all Muslims are Arabs. There are Arab Christians. In the Christian Bible, the Arabic version, the ones that the Copts have in Egypt or the Lebanese Christians have, how do they refer to God? They refer to God as Allah in the Christian Bible. So it's not even a Muslim term, it's an Arabic term. So that is what we believe as Muslims. And this is what our Quran states. And of course the questions that you have are going to be answered now. We want to move straight into the Q&A session. This was my job, just to give a brief overview, break the ice, to get you guys thinking, and hopefully your questions, I see I have some of the questions that come up, and we are going to move straight into the Q&A session, inshallah, or unless the MC has something to add in between. And I hope that this brief, very super brief introduction was able to answer some of your questions and shed some light on what this Islamic faith is all about. And I will continue to participate, inshallah, in the Q&A, be with you till the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mufti Minhajuddin. Now I'm going to introduce the panelists very briefly. I don't believe in long introductions, so I'm just going to give you. I introduced Mufti Minhajuddin. I did not add that he is the director at Darus Salam in Lombard, Illinois. He is an imam there, a religious leader, teaches classes, gives sermons, teaches classes on a variety of subjects at that location, which is roughly 15-20 miles from here, maybe less than that. And we've also got with us, we also have with us Mr. Azam Nizamuddin. He is an attorney at law. He's the general counsel at the North American Islamic Trust. He is also an adjunct professor of theology at Loyola University. He's also the president of the Muslim Bar Association of Chicago. We also have with us Ms. Dahra Ahmed. She is the Muslim chaplain at Northwestern University. As If I understand correctly, she is the first female Muslim chaplain anywhere in the country. Is that correct? The first full-time female Muslim chaplain anywhere in the country. Definitely deserves a round of applause. And then finally, we have with us Dr. Sabil Ahmed, who is the head of the Game Peace Project run by the Islamic Circle of North America, and he's also the president of the Chicago chapter of the Islamic Circle of North America. Now, I'll let the panelists and their responses to the talking, you will all see that they're eminently qualified to answer the questions. We will do our best to distribute the questions amongst the panelists, and any deficiencies are ours, and all the good stuff you hear is coming ultimately from God, but it definitely is the work of our panelists as well. So I'll read off the questions initially. Actually, they'll be reading off the questions, and they'll go down the row from there. So we'll take them one at a time, one per person. And if there are any additions as well, comments by a second panelist, then they'll handle it amongst themselves. And the final comment that I should add before we get into the Q&A is that if you have any questions about the building, the mosque, the structure, not related to Islam generally, Mr. Fazl Mahmoud is in the back, and he will be able to address those for you, either during the Q&A session up here at the mic, or afterwards if you have prior questions. So without further ado, panelists.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you all. So the first question that I have, it says, I have friends that are very Islamophobic. How can I let them know that much of what they believe is false? Well, I think that's a complicated question, because trying to convince somebody else in any issue, trying to convince a Bears fan that they should support Green Bay Packers instead is a pretty monumental task, right? Similarly, if you're a White Sox fan, trying to convince a Cubs fan, So trying to convince somebody that what they see or read or what they hear about Islam in the general schemes of things and trying to persuade them, argue with them, is a pretty tall order in the scheme of things. So I think the way to discuss the issues where they're clearly false information is simply through education. But not education that is, I would say, a sort of argumentative or debate format, but rather simply education that leaves open people's ability to engage in dialogue and conversation. And one of those ways is to simply have people visit the mosque, like on an open mosque day like this. But also, I think developing relationships is important. Getting to know people and what are they really about? What are their concerns and fears? Understanding who they are. That's really important. So it's a two-way street. The question assumes that the other person perhaps needs to be educated and proven false, while we're kind of in the right. Well, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But I think dialogue, always, understanding and education is always a two-way street. As a professor at Loyola, I learn a lot from the questions that my students ask me. I'm there, an expert, and they come in, freshman, sophomore in college, and we're supposed to educate them. But the way they get educated is through question, answer, and discussion. So I think that should apply to daily life as well. Obviously, there are certain things you can tell them which is not true. But as you do so, I think it's important to always leave the door open for conversation and further relation development. That's very important to do.
Greetings of peace, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Well, first of all, thank you so much for taking your Saturday afternoon and being here. It really does mean a lot to our overall community. I have a few questions here on the veil, on the hijab. And I think the way I want to approach this is meant to be a conversation, this is meant to be a dialogue. I can individually sit with you and talk to you about verses and texts and exegesis, like interpretive understanding of the Quran. But I want you to get a better understanding of myself as a Muslim woman and my own narrative in wearing the hijab, as well as probably the story shared by so many of these young women that you see, as well as the older adult females in this room, of why we wear the hijab. And then I think it'll be somewhat of a better conversation and understanding like how we approach scripture in that sense. So let me tell you just a little bit about myself first. I grew up not very far from here. I grew up in Morton Grove, which is about 20 minutes away or so. And I went to a private Muslim school there, so a similar mosque as this one. And my parents were really worried that as children, we would not retain our Muslim values, so they sent us to this private Muslim school. And in many ways, I believe that I was indoctrinated to the faith tradition from a young age. So I wore this hijab, not because I really understood why I was wearing it, but because everybody else around me was wearing it. I started fasting in Ramadan, which is coming soon. All the Muslims in here are really excited about that. They're lying. No, just kidding. They can't lie in the mosque. So we are really excited that Ramadan is coming. And I was fasting because everybody else was fasting. And I think I was praying 5 times a day because everybody else was praying. Then it came time to graduate from grade school and go to high school, and I begged my parents to send me to a public high school. And the argument went something like, I don't want to get to just know like Sarah and Khadija and like Ahmed and Ali. I want to get to know like the Stacys and the Kims and the Jacobs and the Coreys in here, And my parents, my father didn't agree with the Jacob and Corey part. You can probably understand why. But then, I went to Niles West High School. Anyone go to Niles West in here? A couple of people? Okay. And the way I wanted to fit in, even with my hijab, was play team sports, and that's what I did. So I played varsity basketball, I ran track, I played volleyball, and I thought that's how I was going to fit in. And for the most part, most of my non-Muslim friends looked at the hijab and thought, that's different, but they didn't really question it. Until 9/11 happened in my senior year of high school, and the same referee, mind you, who had seen me play for the last 3 years in the Central Suburban League, stopped the game at 1:34 seconds left into the clock and said, number 33, you're in violation of the IHSA, Illinois Rules for Uniform Coded Conduct, meaning he was questioning why I was wearing the veil. Obviously in a really awkward situation. My coach, who was a devout Christian, actually fought for my rights, and he said, you know what, we have all the paperwork to prove that she can wear what she's wearing, and I was let back into the game. But when I was going to the locker room, after you do the sportsmanship handshake, one of the parents walked down from the bleachers and he said, number 33, and turned around and he said, it's a shame they let you back in. And I remember going into the locker room and all of my teammates were really silent. Average like 18, 19 points a game. I thought I would get more respect or something from them that would say, hey, are you okay? But my point to you today is that many Muslim women, I think whenever this question is raised, the first thing I'd like to preface this question with is to understand that there's already an exterior challenge that we always face with the non-Muslim community of trying to explain to them what Islam is not than what Islam actually is. And the hijab often becomes, thank you for shaking your heads, thank you. It becomes a really, it's almost like a burden to constantly say, hey, guess what? A Sikh man will wear his turban with so much pride and with so much love, and people will look at that and say, wow, like he is upholding his tradition. But when a Muslim woman wears her hijab, it's almost like there's questions raised about, is she being forced to wear it? Is somebody abusing her? And believe it or not, my high school honors English teacher asked me to stay after class one day and said, Tahra, I just want you to know that if you need to talk to someone, I'm here for you. And I thought, gosh, finally somebody gets it. Somebody wants to understand me. Then he said, Tahra, if your father forces you to wear that, or he beats you at home, or he abuses you, there are counselors here, there are social workers here, we are all here for you. And I thought, oh my gosh, like you have met my father, like why would you think this, right? And so he went back to his desk where he had printed something. And it was this image, for those of you, some of you are too young to remember this image, but if you remember Dr. Sabil, there was an image that was circulated, and I asked Northwestern News Media to run me the stats on it. It was 183 times between 2001 and 2002, okay, which is a lot. And the image was of a Taliban man holding a stick, beating like women with burqas on. Okay, at least that's what it seemed like. So imagine I'm 16 years old, and my honors English teacher puts a little piece of paper and says, can you explain this to me, right? The juxtapositioning of that, obviously at that time I didn't know how to answer that question, so I thanked him for his time. I'll wrap up, thank you. I thanked him for his time, and I said, you know what, I need to find some answers very quickly because the world is going to continue to ask me these questions. So for the next 15 years of my life, I've dedicated that to try to understand, like, okay, I'm not just going to wear this because other Muslim women around the world wear it or because my friends are wearing it. What does this mean to me? And so what I did was I researched my own Islam, going back to 1st century Islam, and even prior to that, right? And my understanding of the hijab is not just so that a man looks at me and thinks, okay, she's off limits or something, right? Because eventually everybody, in the Muslim faith, you want to get married and have children, all of that. But it's really something that I believe that God has asked of me. It is a command of the Quran, and it is something that I do in order to complete my worship of God. It is something that I do so that I can venerate my relationship with God. And I would like people to understand that and respect that. Now, if people are misusing that, or if someone is enforcing that or is beating their wives for it, I don't think that's actually a fair assessment of why so many Muslim women actually wear the hijab. I hope that was a little bit fair and you can understand that, so thank you so much.
When it comes to salvation, the Quran is really emphatic in saying, in chapter number 4, verse number 157. So I'm just quoting the translation that they boast, means maybe the Jewish people, the Roman people, that we have killed Jesus, the son of Mary, the Messiah. But God is saying that they killed him not, neither they crucified him. It only made to appear to them, and God lifted Jesus to himself. And then it continues that whoever disagrees with them, they are following nothing but conjecture. So yes, we respect your belief that according to Paul, according to the Bible, that Jesus died, he was resurrected. But according to the Islamic point of view, Jesus did not die, God lifted Jesus up to himself. But now we come to the important point of salvation according to Islam and Christianity. According to Islam, salvation according to chapter 2, verse number 25 of the Quran. I'm also paraphrasing, the translation is that anyone who has the right belief means worshipping only God alone in his oneness and doing good deeds, then God is going to guarantee that person eternal paradise. That means God's mercy comes into play. So according to the speed limit, she should not get the ticket. Would you be happy? No, right? It's personal responsibility, personal accountability possible. If I do something good, God will obviously reward me. If I do something wrong, I cannot give my sins to somebody else. Either I ask God for forgiveness and inshallah God could forgive me, or I have to bear the consequences. It's according to Islam, nobody dies for our sins. God is the Savior. He can forgive the sins because He says in the Quran, chapter 4, verse number 116, that God is willing to forgive all the sins, but there is only one sin He is not willing to forgive. If a person commits it, if a person dies with that. And that sin, the unpardonable sin in Islam is to associate partners with God. Saying that God is God, but this person is also God. This idol is also God. This money, the fame, the name, any other associates that we do with God, that is the only sin. According to Islam, if we die with that without repenting, it's not forgiven. So yes, there are similarities, but the concept of salvation, who Jesus is, or who He was, is the difference between what Islam says and what you believe. And we respect your belief. Good question.
I just want to add to what Dr. Sabeel said really quick. I think the way to look at this in terms of the fundamental difference is not to point out the differences and see which one may be more accurate or not, but rather to say, look, what is the human condition? What is the human situation? For Christianity, the human condition is that we are endowed with sin. As a result of that sin, we need to have a prophetic moment in history in the life of Jesus Christ, in which He dies on the cross, He suffers, He resurrects, and it's redeemed. The sin of humanity is redeemed through that historical event, and then there is salvation. What Islam says, and it's not that you're right or wrong, this is what Islam says, okay? Is that the sin is as a result of human weakness. We are by nature weak. It doesn't make us flawed, it doesn't make us bad, but we are weak. throughout our lives, we, in order to overcome that weakness, have to be reminded of who we are at the end of the day. We have to be reminded in our essence, in our nature. And that's where the role of prophecy comes in, and revelation comes in. So through revelation and prophecy, we are reminded of who we are. So with respect to the life of Jesus, peace be upon him, or Muhammad, peace be upon him, we are reminded through their lives who and what God is, and we're then asked to follow in their footsteps as a paradigm. And if we do that, then we ultimately return to God ourselves. That's really the two ways to look at this fundamental problem of why human beings sin or are weak. There's a question here. Just kind of going along the lines of comparative analysis, there's a question that was raised, which is very good here. It says, does Islam have a baptism, confirmation, or a communion service? Is there a circumcision of baby boys? Do boys have something like a bar mitzvah? Are there sacraments in Islam? So I'm going to take those four questions and convert it into what is the life cycle in Islam, in the lived human experience. So of course there's birth, right? There's birth, and the birth is deemed to be a gift from God, and people get together and celebrate whenever a baby is born. And then through their different stages, there's certain events for men and women that also are celebrated. Sometimes certain cultures celebrate the fact that when people start studying the religion, such as reading the Quran for the first time or entering an educational facility, that's also a cause for celebration. Sometimes there's circumcision. In certain parts of the Muslim world, the circumcision happens at a later age. It could be 4, 5, 6, I think in Turkey it's like 7 or 8, those poor kids. And of course in the United States it happens right after birth very, very soon. And then there's the period of adolescence in which they discover who they are. And they discover who they are as women, females, and men do the same. And there's a process of education. And then ultimately there's marriage, where people get married to members of the opposite sex. And if they're fortunate and gifted enough, meaning gifted from God and blessed by God, then they may have children and raise them, and ultimately they will pass. So those are the sort of life cycles. Now in terms of the issue of the sacraments, the best sort of comparison of sacraments, I would say, is what we call the 5 pillars of Islam. Okay? So in other words, these sacraments in, say, Catholicism allow you to partake in the Catholic tradition or the Lutheran tradition. You have to have certain things, such as baptism. You have to have things such as communion and marriage and others and so forth. In Islam, basically, it's not only testifying that there's only one God and Prophet Muhammad that is, but then you also have to partake in the 5 daily prayers. You have to give charity every year. You have to fast during the month of Ramadan, and then at least once, if you're able to, go and do your pilgrimage, physical pilgrimage to Mecca. That would be the equivalent of the sacraments in the Islamic tradition.
And understanding the systemic injustice that's taking place rather than blaming, an entire religion on it. Because if you were to do that, then you can say, well, the Mormon practice of having multiple wives is oppressive. And that's, if Mormons consider themselves Christian, then you're putting all of Christians in the same box, so to speak, right? Or if you have friends who, get drunk and then beat their wives, I will not say like Jack, who is a Christian, is, doing this out of his Christian behavior or some kind of theology that he follows, but rather because Jack needs to go to AA, right? Like he needs to seek help. So I think folks here are really smart. Most Americans I found in my conversations, the average Americans, they're not, they know that there's a lot more to understanding a particular situation. So that's what I wanted to say. But finally, I just wanted to say that, thank you so much for coming, because I think these are the kind of conversations that we need to continue having as a community. For me, as a young Muslim woman living in postmodernity, being a Muslim is a conscious decision. No one is forcing me to be a Muslim. For me, Islam is very much about submitting to a higher power. It is where I find a sense of meaning and purpose. And ultimately, I think the questions that we ask are, whatever it is that we follow, does it allow us to be good with each other? Does it allow us to be testaments of God's presence in this world? The Quran says that we are khalifas, right? Like we are the, basically the caretakers of this planet and this environment. And I'm really glad that you all came because I think we have to do this together. This work has to be together. And in order for us to do that, we have to be able to love each other, trust each other, and build bonds of brother and sisterhood. Ultimately, whatever it is that we follow, it has to be a testament to the divine love of God. And so if we harm each other, or we are harming each other in ways that, or we're being hurtful to each other, that is not the, I would say that is not religion. And so to me, the following of my faith is very much about being an example of God's love and presence in this world. And so I hope that at least that is what you got out of what I had to say, and so thank you for coming.
So with that, I should say the women in charge have asked me as a mosque, and these are not the last questions you are asking about Islam. I should add in these. So with that, I will eat some other sweets in the back. I'm sure they're good. So please partake in that, and feel free to come up to any of us and ask us questions, hang around and talk to us, etc. But this is the end of the formal portion of the event. Thank you again for coming. Assalamu alaikum.
I want a clean up crew.